Areas of color are some of the most noticeable features of any landscape. These brilliant flowering and foliage plants are extremely valuable for brightening up our gardens. Well, the two most limiting factors when it comes to growing colorful bedding plants in our Oklahoma summers are drought and heat. Now, the drought we can overcome because if we're diligent and the community where we live isn't experiencing severe water rationing, it's possible to supply enough water to meet the plant's needs. Now, the heat, on the other hand, that's a completely different story, especially when we're having one of our enduring beastly hot dry spells in the summertime. Sometimes we can position our seasonal color beds where they receive afternoon shade, which helps somewhat, but other than that, there's not a lot we can do to keep our plants cool. I don't think there are many of us who would want to invest in air-conditioned greenhouse coverings or ice machines to put out in our gardens to cool down our plants. Well, the good news is we can have colorful bedding plants, flowering and foliage plants throughout the hot summer months if we select and plant those species which are tolerant to intense heat. Most heat-tolerant plants are native to the tropics, or at least the subtropical areas, some not too far south of Oklahoma, like the zinnias here that are native to Mexico, and this little annual phlox that's native to parts of Texas. This phlox is sometimes called Texas phlox. It's Phlox drummondii, and these are popular worldwide as bedding plants and as conservatory plants. They come in a wide range of colors. They're very easy to grow. We have a bed here at our studio gardens where we just sowed the seeds directly in the soil, and the plants are doing quite well. But this little purple one here in the pot with the silver helichrysum hasn't really batted an eye throughout the hot part of the summer. The zinnias are very familiar plants, I'm sure, to a lot of us. My parents grew these when I was a child, but the zinnias come in quite a range of sizes. We have some varieties that are only 8 to 10 inches tall, while some zinnias can get up to about 5 or 6 feet. They also come in a wide range of colors, very brilliant reds, oranges, pinks, yellows. We even have a green zinnia in our green garden, the cultivar Envy, with green petals. The zinnias are favorites of butterflies. We've got these here in our butterfly garden, and another plant that really handles the heat well and is very easy to grow. In fact, you can start these from seed as late as mid-July and still have a nice display of zinnias. Well, both the zinnias and the Phlox drummondii are botanically true annuals. This means that they germinate, they grow, flower, set seed, and die all in one year. We have several other bedding plants that are sometimes referred to as annuals, when in fact they're actually tropical perennials or even tropical shrubs. Just because they don't overwinter, they're referred to as annuals, or sometimes we say that they're annual here. Well, a lot of those tropical perennials and tropical shrubs make excellent heat-tolerant bedding plants, and I've got several of those that I want to show you. Periwinkles are tropical perennials from Madagascar, and they usually look great during hot, dry summers like the one we've had this year. You can grow the regular bedding type of periwinkles that look absolutely spectacular when they're massed in large numbers in beds. They grow very well in raised beds where they have good drainage, and they usually do the best in soil that hasn't been planted with periwinkles ever before. You can also grow the trailing type of periwinkles like we've got here in this urn here in our patio garden. These look great spilling over the edges of raised beds or coming out of window boxes or in containers like we've got right here. Now, the number one enemy to periwinkles is Phytophthora blight. And right down here in this urn, we've got an example of the disease. You can see this little wilted stem here and the browning of the stem below. This sometimes attacks the single stems of the plants, or we'll see entire plants with this problem and they'll eventually die. But Phytophthora blight is a water mold fungus that's soil-borne, so it stays in the soil for many years. If you have this problem on your periwinkles, the best thing to do is to remove those infected plants, bag them up, put them in the trash, and then for the next year and several years after that, plant something besides periwinkles in those spots. Other things you can do to lessen the Phytophthora problem with periwinkles would be to inspect your plants at the nursery when you buy them. Make sure they don't have any of these little wilted stems or any discoloration on the stems or any other illness-looking problems with the plants. Also, when you plant them out in the garden, wait a little bit later than your other plants. Put them out in mid-May. Periwinkles don't like cold weather, and we don't want them to be stressed and weakened and more susceptible to the disease. Also, when you've got them growing, don't overwater them, don't over-fertilize them, and try not to splash any soil up on the stems. You can put down a mulch to keep that from happening, or use drip irrigation. And then rotate your plantings of periwinkles. Try not to ever plant them in the same place if possible. And if all else fails, you can just enjoy periwinkles in containers like we've got here with this urn. That way you can switch out that soil and replace it with fresh, uninfected media each year. But periwinkles, if you can get around the disease, make wonderful heat-tolerant annuals or bedding plants for Oklahoma. Right down here we've got another tropical perennial. This is Angelonia. These plants are in the Snapdragon family, so sometimes they're called summer snapdragons. These are nice heat-tolerant plants from Mexico and Central and South America, and they're related to the snapdragons, but unlike snapdragons, they perform very well in the hot part of the year. I love the spike-like arrangement of the flowers on the flowering stems. These make very good cut flowers, and they come in colors of purples, pinks, and whites. Lantanas are a wonderful heat-tolerant bedding plant for Oklahoma. These are tropical shrubs. Right down here we've got some of the trailing varieties. This is Lantana montevidensis from South America, but we also have lots of the shrubby or regular type lantanas, Lantana chimera. This particular one is called New Gold, and I love that golden yellow color on this plant. It's also a little more compact or lower growing than some of the other shrubby-like Lantana chimeras. Another thing you can do with the lantanas is to train them into standards like we've got right here. This is a New Gold standard that I brought to the studio gardens about 7 years ago when I first started as studio garden manager. There are a few types of lantana that will overwinter here in Oklahoma, but they're best treated as tender bedding plants. Lantana flowers on new wood, so the way to keep them flowering is to keep them growing. So don't hold back when it comes to watering or fertilizing if they need that. Right over here in our patio garden, we've got a raised bed with succulent plants, and there are a few plants in here that make wonderful choices for heat-tolerant bedding. This is one of the purslanes. This is a double variety right here with the kind of red-orange and pinkish colors in the flowers. Right over here we've got a bicolored purslane with sort of a yellow and magenta coloration. And over here is a larger flowered UB series of purslane. The UB series is great because these have flowers that are a little bit larger and they stay open a little bit longer than some of the other purslane. The purslane and rose moss, like we've got right over here, are excellent heat-tolerant plants, easy to grow in the garden. These are botanically true annuals as well, and because of their succulent nature, these can survive drought as well as the heat. This plant here above the rose moss is a new plant to the horticulture industry, kind of new in this area. It's called Bulbine. It's a plant in the lily family. It's very succulent, almost aloe vera-like in its habit, but it is a plant that, if you can find it, makes a good choice for a flowering plant in the hot summer months as well in our state. Pentas are wonderful heat-tolerant bedding plants. They're actually a tropical shrub native to tropical areas in Africa. In fact, another name for pentas is Egyptian star cluster, and you can see they have the 5 petals where they get their pentas meaning name. And if you have only one pentas, it doesn't have a singular ending. It always has that S on the end. So if you have one pentas. You don't have a penta. That's a ship that Columbus sailed in. But this particular Pentas is one of the butterfly series, Butterfly Pink, and they're aptly named because they do a really good job of attracting butterflies and hummingbirds to the garden. Right back here in a container we have one of the New Look series of Pentas, and I think the New Looks are probably my favorite. This is New Look Red, and I like them so much because they're very compact. These plants are actually in a container that we brought into the greenhouse last year. So in 2 years of growth, you can still see that the plant is still very compact, very well behaved. Whenever you're deadheading Pentas, you just come to the receptacles here where all the flowers have kind of fallen away, and some of these are kind of past their prime. So we just pinch that away with the 2 leaves. It forces more energy into making these other buds open up, and it makes the plants a little bit bushier as well. Whenever we're thinking about color for the summer garden in Oklahoma, it's important to think about some of the ornamental grasses, and one of my favorite is this one right here. This is the ruby grass cultivar of pink crystals. It's a fairly low growing tender grass. It's got kind of silvery greenish leaves that give it a nice effect, and then also the flowers with this soft pink delicate texture is just a wonderful addition to the garden as well. The pink crystals ruby grass. Well, in addition to the pink crystals, we always plant a few of the purple fountain grass plants in our garden. We always love that plant, and recently we've been using a lot of the pink fountain grass. Just gives us a little bit of a different color and a little bit of a different look in the garden. Another tropical perennial is the Scaevola or fan flower, and it is a plant that was once one of our Oklahoma proven selections. It's a tropical plant from Australia, from the tropical areas of that country, and it works great in large containers or window boxes or raised beds where it can drape or cascade over the sides. And also I think the extra drainage from large containers or raised beds helps benefit the health of the plant as well. Well, here nearby we have the Mealy sage or Salvia farinaceae. This is the cultivar Victoria. A lot of people will just call this Victoria blue salvia, and it blooms very well throughout the summertime here in Oklahoma. It gives us a wonderful dark blue or purplish color in the garden. These will sometimes overwinter here in our state, and that's because they're native to Texas, not too far away. So we occasionally get a few of these coming back in the springtime, but it's generally best to treat them as tender bedding plants. The Salvia Victoria is a good plant for use in cut flower arrangements, and you can also dry the flowers. Just cut several of those, bundle them up, hang them upside down, and they dry very well and retain a lot of that dark color. Well, another salvia nearby in this garden is coral nymph. This is Salvia coccinea, wonderful annual warm season sage as well. Makes a great complement to the Victoria sage. Tropical plants perform extremely well here in Oklahoma in the summertime, and that's because they feel right at home here in our sweltering heat. Some of our favorite tropical plants are the yellow bells, like we've got right here. Just look at that large cluster of trumpet-like flowers. This is the cultivar Gold Star, and it's a little more floriferous than some of the other yellow bells. Some of the other tropical plants we really like to plant are the blue Plumbago with its pale blue clusters of flowers and sort of scandent habit. We also like the firebush with its orange, reddish-orange, trumpet-shaped flowers, and also we get a little bit of that red-orange color from the stems and leaves of the firebush. Well, we always like to include some foliage plants with our tropical bedding designs out here at our studio garden. So we always include some of the ornamental sweet potatoes. Right here we've got a container with some of the new varieties. We've got Sweet Caroline lime green, we've got Sweet Caroline purple, and then a new color for the sweet potato spectrum. We have Sweet Caroline bronze. These are a little bit less vigorous than some of the other sweet potatoes like Margarita and Blackie. These are wonderful sweet potatoes, but I think my favorite of the ornamental sweet potatoes is still the tricolored foliage of pink frost. I just love that. White, pink, and green foliage, the smaller leaves, less vigorous habit, and it just gives a wonderful element to the garden. Some of the other foliage plants that we like to include every year here at our studio gardens are the sun coleus. Two of my favorite are the Alabama sunset with its pink and yellow foliage, and then Japanese giant has a wonderful splashing of pinks, yellows, whites, and a few other colors mixed into its foliage. Another foliage plant that looks all the world like a coleus is this plant. It's actually a close relative, the Perilla, and this is a new hybrid Perilla called Magilla. Magilla Perilla we got from Select Seeds to try out in our garden this year. It's performed very well. It's given us a lot of color here in the bright sunshine. Well, don't let the high temperatures of summer keep you from having brilliant color in your garden. Plant some of these tropical and subtropical plants that feel right at home in the searing heat.